Welcome to Futureproof Business. Smart strategies, real insights, and tools to lead and scale in a fast-changing world. Let's future-proof your success.
Welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Rosenstein. Today I have the honor of interviewing Courtney Lohmann. Courtney, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Can you share with us a little bit about yourself and your background with the audience?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to. I am now, I would say, there's a long history of my career and whatnot, but now I'm a business owner. So I'm a consultant, a fractional sustainability leader, and a keynote speaker. And I have been doing that work for a little over 2 years now. I spent the majority of my career in the meetings and events, hospitality and tourism industry, and have pivoted now to be in the space where I can really consult with different types of businesses and speak and spread my message on stages.
Oh, thank you. So on your website, you talk about igniting your personal leadership in today's world. Can you explain what does that mean?
Yeah, I would say, let me take it back a ways. So in 2014, as I was kind of growing in my career, I was about 14 years in my career. I hit a plateau, I would call it. While I still liked my work, there were things happening in my work that I just was unmotivated or I guess not as excited to show up at work anymore. And I was really thinking about totally switching careers and doing something different. And in kind of out of left field, I found a conference that was happening within the meetings and events industry. And at the time it was called the Green Meeting Industry Council, and they were having their annual event. And I asked my bosses if I could go. They said yes. I showed up and found out there was this whole group of people, like 200 plus people, that were trying to rally the entire industry around being more sustainable. And so part of what I had been struggling with kind of internally was this idea that I was in a industry that created a lot of waste and excess without being kind of responsible with what that was doing. And then from a personal passion standpoint, I love traveling and adventure and discovering new cultures and places around the world and being in nature. And I don't want to contribute negatively to somehow the destruction of that. And so these two worlds of mine were not aligned until that moment where I showed up there at that conference and realized, hey, I could stay in my industry and I could really dig into this idea around sustainable event planning. And perhaps that can really change my viewpoint and change how I handle my work and change how I funnel my passions more into what I'm doing for my work versus them feeling like they were kind of separate. And so when I talk about igniting your passion and bringing that in to kind of developing who you are as a leader, it's all really based and centered around that part of my story. I think I've had some natural leadership tendencies my entire life, even without really realizing it. But it was at that moment that I started then to make very intentional choices around what I was going to do and what I was going to pursue and how I was showing up and volunteering in the industry and taking on different roles. And it just kind of snowballed and escalated. And it was an entirely different path to leadership. Leadership is normally a very linear, these are the designated rungs and here's how you go up those rungs. And that's all anyone is allowed to do. And this really was me carving a completely different path, moving into these leadership type roles. And it was all really driven more by my passion and what I wanted to do and the change I wanted to see happen in the world.
So you mentioned on your website also that you refer to yourself as an Impact Rebel. Can you explain to the audience, what does that mean to be an Impact Rebel and what created that identity?
So that kind of came to me. It's a funny story. I was having a conversation with a friend of mine. She is also a keynote speaker. She has a business where she leads people on these outdoor expeditions up in northern Minnesota and whatnot. She's a really incredible lady. And I was kind of talking to her and explaining to her what I wanted to do as I started my business and how I wanted to develop a keynote and what I wanted to talk about. And kind of through that conversation I had said to her, I was like, I just want to draw on my career path being that it was different and how I kind of led myself into these leadership roles and how I didn't necessarily follow the norm. Like I am not that person that likes to be boxed in or contained. I'm not that person that likes to or that operates as well, like inside the constraints of what the normal is. And that I like to be adventurous and I like to be a little bit rebellious. And she, funny enough, kind of sat there and she thought about it for a minute. And she was, oh, she's like a little bit of a wild one, like a little bit of a cowboy. I like it. And I was like, that's what it is. I was like, that's exactly what it is. And so in my consulting work, I was really utilizing that word impact, because to me, impact is what we want to create, right? The impact we want to have in the world is what we want to see created, the change we want to have make. I have a whole acronym for impact, which I can circle back to here in a second, but that's what we want. That's what we're striving for. It's creating whatever that important impact is for us. And then the rebel piece of it is saying, don't box yourself in to what the norm, whatever that norm may be, like don't box yourself into that norm. Be a little bit of a wild one, be a little bit of a cowboy or a cowgirl, and be a little bit rebellious here and think outside of the box and start to carve the path that you know is needed to get to wherever it is that you need to get to create that impact. And so that's kind of how I brought those two words together. So that's my kind of signature. At some point, I should probably officially, trademark that or something. But yeah, that's kind of how I landed there.
Yeah, it definitely stands out. When I saw that, I was like, wow. It definitely stood out on the webpage. I was like, wow, I have to ask you about that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So as you mentioned, like you had a successful corporate career and then you shifted into leadership and sustainability. What type of internal like mindset shift did you have to make to in order to make that pivot? Because that's obviously a really big shift going from.
Yeah, I think it stemmed from being in a place where I was just no longer satisfied with what I was doing. I started my career in events really excited and really loving what I was doing. And I had this goal. I was like, I am going to be the lead planner for the opening ceremonies of the Summer Olympic Games, because in my head, that was the biggest event there is, right? Probably still is to this day. But I think over the years, as you evolve as an individual, your wants and needs evolve and your goals and objectives evolve. And when I kind of started to sit back and look at where I was and what I was doing and the kinds of things that I really wanted to be involved with, that's when I had that moment where I'm just like, these things don't align for me any longer. And so I think diving into and understanding that internally and trying to make sense of what that was, I had taken a couple of different career breaks and taken some big trips abroad. And on one of those trips abroad, I had volunteered. I was actually in the Fijian Islands, and I had volunteered and worked in a school and interacted with the people there in a very personal way. You really I lived with a host family. I was completely ingrained in the community, and just to see and understand what's important there versus what felt like this kind of fast living, crazy life in the US. And I've had that similar experience that I had in Fiji and other countries, and just kind of seeing where everything was, I was like, this just isn't the right alignment for me. And so then it was trying to peel that back, I think, and really understanding that if this isn't aligned with what I want to do, then I need to discover what is aligned with what I want to do. And then how do I go about discovering that? And then how can I go about pursuing that path? And so that's kind of what I spoke about before.
So how does like you mentioned, you like to use the word like a rebel. Why is that so important in like business leadership today?
I think that we're just seeing such a shift, especially from a generational standpoint. And I just don't feel like the normal carved paths are where we need to be from a leadership standpoint. It used to be that a leader was somebody who was defined based on where they fell in an org chart. And the term leadership is actually defined as the ability to bring a vision to fruition. And so what I feel like we need to lean into more is those people that are quote unquote deemed to be in these leadership roles. So they're managers or directors or vice presidents or what have you. I think that they could look at leadership in a little bit more of this rebellious sense and go back out to their teams and give their teams more freedom to really bring a vision to fruition, that they're going to find they get far better innovative ideas. They're going to find they get far better engagement from their teams, and they're going to create a space where people speak up more and want to contribute more, and then ultimately drive the company in a better direction. And so I think it's kind of turning leadership around a little bit, where it's, I feel, and I'm a Gen Xer, I feel like I've grown up in that space where it's always been a very top-down way to live within a leadership space. And I think we need to reverse that a little bit more and give people that space to bring a vision to fruition, and give them that space to dream big and think of ideas and innovate, not be afraid to speak up when they're sitting at the table.
So what does like the impact of one mean to you?
Oh man, the impact of one. How would I sum that up best? For me, it's really how the impact or the change that you want to create is far simpler than it feels. Probably the easiest way to sum it up. I started talking about the impact of one because, especially when you think about what happens within the world of sustainability and social impact, it's a really big umbrella. The topics are very complex. They feel overwhelming often to try to tackle. And I like people to look at the big questions and the big issues that fall under that umbrella. But then through conversations and a lot of times through my consulting work, I guide them back to this one small thing that they can start with. What's one thing that you could implement today that helps you build along this path to create the impact that you want to create? And when you start with something really simple, you start to see that as that becomes a habit, so whether that's your personal life or that's in work, as that kind of becomes a habit or it becomes a part of your system, and everyone gets used to what that is, it's not that hard to add on to it. The hardest thing to do is to take that first simple step. But once you take that first step, you can start to take multiple steps and typically in much quicker fashion after it. And before you know it, you're building into a really big area of impact with far less effort than when you looked at it under that overwhelming umbrella kind of idea.
So how do you guide professionals in connecting their passion with purpose and like in a practical way? Because sometimes people say, oh, I'm passionate about this, but it's just really like a hobby or just an idea in their mind. It doesn't really go anywhere.
Yeah, it doesn't really go anywhere. So I'll come back to impact. So when I work with for different clients for consulting, or when I talk and deliver my keynote, I define impact as igniting more passion to align your commitments and transform. And I take that and I break it down into a 3-step strategy, which is passion, persevere, and perform. And it's a little complex here to kind of explain all of that. But the idea is that what you really want to root into is defining what your passion is and why it's so important to you. And then from there, you have to be able to take that passion and tie it to what it is that you're doing. So that's that alignment piece. You have to be able to see, does my passion align with the purpose of the business that I work for? Does my passion align with the company I decided to start? Does my passion align with XYZ, whatever your kind of individual situation is? And then once you work through how those two things start to align, then you start to see like the doors kind of open up for you to see how you can create some commitments. So if it aligns with the work that you're doing, if I go back to my example, when I was working at events, I found ways that I said, okay, environmental and social sustainability is so important to me. I am going to find ways for us as a company to align with some of these initiatives. So like I helped implement a food rescue program that we as a company were able to implement and utilize for a lot of client events. So you have to find the right way to align what you're passionate about with your business. And then you have to start to innovate and create and understand how your business is working and operating so that you can create commitments that can be implemented at that business level, or again, in your personal life or what have you. This can also be like how you showcase your leadership. So you have this idea, you have made sure that it aligns correctly. You have written out commitments in terms of this is how we can actually start to look at it from an operational standpoint and why it would work. And then you get to that transform piece, which is where you actually write out what this looks like and what this is going to feel like and who all the stakeholders are that have to be involved and how it's going to support our clients or what have you. And you kind of transform through and are able to push that out for everybody to experience. So that's how I talk about it and break it down for everyone.
But why is it important for business leaders to connect with their passion? Because for a lot of business leaders, where they work for a corporation or they have their own business, they see it as like a job where they're just like doing to make money to pay the bills and stuff. A lot of people, unfortunately, are not really connected with their passion. So where does passion really come into business leadership? Why is that so important?
I think it's because we show up different. I think when we're really rooted in something that we're connected to, and so when I talk about passion, it's something that feels really purposeful to you. It's something that you're really connected to. It's something that drives you some way from within. And I think once, especially as leaders, once we get into a place where we're connected with that it changes how we operate within that business sense. So for some leaders, it could change how they motivate their teams, right? It could change how they come and show up and have those conversations and encourage their teams to work on projects or what have you. For others, it's going to help them find new ways to innovate within their company. So as you're seeing this transition, especially in the consumer market, you're seeing consumers really start to shift how they're making decisions around what they buy and when they buy and how they invest their money and things like that. And under the big umbrella of sustainability and social impact, those kinds of topics are bubbling to the top a lot. So as a leader, if you look at what are some of the things that we're passionate about or we're committed to or that drive us, how do we bring that into our work? How do we innovate with that through what it is that we're doing and create these new ways to continue to engage with all of our different stakeholder groups? It's also a really big, important piece from a employee engagement standpoint. So as you start to look at some of the younger generations, it's some within Gen X, but then really the next generations down, it's far more important. They want to be engaged with their work on a much more personal level. They want to feel like they're showing up and they're participating in something that has a bigger impact than just what shows up on the P&L. They're not as concerned about that. They want to be involved in something that does include a little bit of that passion. And so taking all of that under consideration and looking for ways to tie it together is why it's so important for leaders today.
So you come from worked a lot in the travel industry. Do you still work with just leaders in the travel industry, or do you also now work with other industries as well?
I work with other industries now as well. I would say a lot of my work is still in the travel, hospitality, and events industry, just because I have such a big network of people there. But I have started to branch out as well and work in other markets and talk with other people.
And like, you use also the word like impact many times, but when some people think of like the word impact, they think about something like huge or humongous that's going to be like a really large scale. I mean, is that really always the case? Impact has to be something like really humongous? Or it can also mean smaller like actions or smaller wins.
It can absolutely be smaller actions and smaller wins. I talk a lot about building upon your small wins, but I talk about breaking things down. Take a big issue that you want to solve. So if you're saying you want to figure out how to be zero waste, take a big issue like that and break it down into really small bite-sized pieces. You're never going to say, I'm going to be zero waste. And by the end of, if we were to say it today, we declared it today, we're going to be zero waste. By July 31st, you're not going to be zero waste. It's a challenging and complex topic in order to get there. And so the little one by one steps and starting with something really small and then building upon it and moving and enjoying those little wins and moving forward and continuing down that path, maybe 5 years from now, you are zero waste. And so you have to stop and appreciate those little wins and celebrate them because they're a really big deal. Those little wins are what help you take that next step.
Maybe some people in the audience they've heard of the word sustainability, but they're not really sure what does it really mean. Can you maybe like clearly define to some of the people who may not know what it is? And why is it so important? Because some corporations, like business leaders, don't like mention the word sustainability in a speech to, but only is doing it for like political reasons. Is just giving lip service. There's no real action behind it. So why is sustainability really important to business leadership and to everybody in the community?
Yeah, that's a big question. All right. So we'll break it down first. I'll break it down by what sustainability is. You may have heard the term corporate social responsibility in the past. You may have heard the term environmental social governance, which is also called ESG. We've probably seen that a lot in the news in recent years. Some people use the word regenerative. They all, at this point in time, they all generally mean the same thing. And what it really roots down to is this concept of people, planet, profit. The triple bottom line is what it's often called. And it's used as these three buckets to summarize the complexity of the topic. So you've got the three buckets: people, planet, profit. So your idea is that you want to look at and take care of people and communities. You want to ensure that people and the communities where people live are supported, they're safe, that they have what they need to live day to day, that they're able to interact well with one another, et cetera, et cetera. It can also relate to, from a corporate level, it can also relate to different people initiatives that you have internally. So maybe you have an employee volunteer program, or you have an employee mentoring program internally at your organization, things of that nature. The planet part is really all of the environmental pieces. So you hear about companies that are donating to carbon offset programs that would fall underneath this planet bucket. You talk about companies that are figuring out how to reduce their waste. They're re-engineering things like plastic bottles into new materials and products. A lot of manufacturing that we hear about and know about today really kind of falls under that planet piece because of how they're trying to change what happens with emissions from manufacturing and how that's affecting our world and our planet, biodiversity, things like that. The profit piece is interesting. Some people really have a problem with that profit piece, but rooted in everything that we do is how our economy continues to thrive and grow. If our economy isn't thriving and growing, well, then we're going to have even bigger problems in the people and planet bucket. So this concept is that you want to take people, planet, profit and ensure that there's a good balance between them at all times. And so by keeping that profit piece in there, it's recognizing that the decisions we make need to be in support of how our economies and our businesses can continue to grow and support people so that we all thrive. And so this idea of keeping them very aligned and centered together, I think is critically important. And I think if you look at some of the big businesses out there that have put in massive worldwide businesses that are talking about sustainability on really large scales, I think they do a really good job of balancing those three. They have, from a corporate standpoint, they have found there's a lot of value in driving costs down internally as they start to implement certain sustainability initiatives. So they could be cutting their waste, but they're also cutting maybe how much it costs for them to produce an item because now they've found better materials to use. And so there's a lot of business cases like that support why sustainability initiatives are important. And then there's a lot of case study work around how different types of sustainability initiatives are great from an employee retention, attraction, and engagement standpoint. And one of the biggest expenses companies have is hiring new people. And so the more that you can reduce that employee turnover and the more you can engage your employees in the work that you're doing and keep them excited and motivated, then the better your company operates. So those two examples, you kind of start to see the balance between that people, planet, profit, and why it's so important as we go forward. Did I cover? I think I tried to cover everything in that question.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
And I'm sorry if that question was more than a mouthful. You mentioned there are some companies that are doing an amazing job with sustainability, which is great, but some are still struggling. In your opinion,
Sure.
why is that? Why are some companies still not up to par with having better levels of sustainability? Is it that they don't know about it, or they just don't care, or they just don't understand? Because that's maybe like where you really come in with you through your keynote speaking and really promoting the importance of sustainability to leadership. And you said it's not just for their needs, it helps everybody because, as you said, if the economy is not doing well, then businesses and corporations cannot make as good as profit as they possibly could.
Yeah, true. And the answer to that question is also kind of complex. It is a little bit of everything that you've said, and is part that some companies aren't as interested in the topic. Some companies are really interested, but they don't necessarily have infrastructure support. Some companies are so small that they don't have the resources to really commit to the types of changes that they can and should be making. So I think there's a variety of reasons for what goes on. I think the airline industry is an interesting one to look at. The airline industry gets knocked around a lot because obviously if you fly in a plane, they're using fuel to fly the plane. So it's creating a pretty big carbon footprint every time a plane is flown. There's a ton of work going on in the airline industry, and many of the airlines are doing great jobs, right? They're changing all the materials they're using inside their planes. They're trying to make the planes lighter so that they're more fuel efficient. They're changing how they source food and beverage things and how they recycle and how they operate their business structures within their offices and things like that to be more sustainable. And so they can do all of those things, and they can start to cut what their emissions and their waste streams are. But they still have this big black cloud hanging over them that says, yes, but you're using fuel no matter what. And it's not necessarily because they don't want to develop more of the sustainable aviation fuel, which is like a whole separate thing that's happening. And there's a lot of development going on around that. But there's also only so much of it available. And it's because it's newer technology and they're trying to ramp it up, it's currently more expensive than regular fuel is. So they're trying to find the right balance between their people, planet, profit. And so they get a lot of, you hear negative things about what's happening, but if you dig into it, there's actually a lot that many of those airline companies have already tried to implement to help re-up and get themselves there. So I think sometimes it's understanding, especially from a consumer standpoint, it's understanding the complexity of the issues. I think many corporations have not helped themselves from that greenwashing standpoint. I think they generalize so much because it's hard to tell this complex story that then as things have continued to evolve and change, you have people who are like, but that's not what they said, or that's not really what they're doing. And then they end up in kind of these little spirals of not having quite communicated appropriately. But I think generally for the most part, you've got most businesses out there that are doing what they can. I think some are still only driven by if their clients are going to force them to participate. I think those are your smaller businesses just because they don't have the same types of resources. But I think others are seeing the value of what a strong sustainability initiative brings. And so they're developing their teams and their businesses to be more of that.
Can you give maybe a specific example of a business that successfully aligned with purpose, with performance?
Performance how?
Like in terms of the output, like the business output.
I'm trying to think. I don't have the ability to name client names of people that I've worked with, unfortunately. But I can say, I can answer it a little bit more generally. So I apologize.
Yeah.
I'm just bound by some of my contracts. There are different types of sustainability assessments that are out there that different corporations use. They essentially are grading or using a third-party company to assure that the businesses they work with are meeting certain sustainability initiatives. And so I guess what I've seen through some of my work is that when some of these organizations are asked to really look at these third-party assessments and they start to dig into these more stringent frameworks around sustainability, they start to see the value in aligning more closely with what some of that is. And so I've had a couple of those clients that really look at those frameworks and say, okay, we want to dig into this section and we really want to apply it to what our company is doing. Can you help us do that? I say, yes, of course. And so we go through that. And a lot of it is rooted in that, what is our passion? How does it fit with our purpose? And let's take this and make it feel like it fits for us and it matches our company culture. And then on the end of that, after they've submitted for this assessment and whatnot, they've actually scored fairly well. So you see how that, that to me, the end result is that you see how really taking and understanding what the sustainability frameworks are and tying it to the core of what your business is and tying it to that culture, that's what gets you to the success. It's not just trying to do a checkbox. And so as I've worked with some of those companies, I've really seen that shine through, and it's been a lot of fun. And then it motivates them. You share that internally. You say, by aligning with all of these things, look at what we've done. We're now able to be globally recognized at this level by this major worldwide assessment company, third-party assurance company. So those are pretty big wins and show a really tight alignment to that purpose-driven model.
So what advice we would give to like business leaders who want to create a regenerative like workplace?
Oh my gosh. We might need a whole other podcast for that one.
Oh, well, if you think it's too big, we can leave it to another.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'll definitely I can give some answer to it today for sure. I think my number one thing would say to find a way to start. I think oftentimes, even with the smaller kinds of businesses that I've interacted with, it's kind of always over here it's on the to-do list or it's on the idea board and it's a part of the goals and objectives, but it never gets prioritized high enough. And that most of the time, once a company does get to it, that leadership team really does start to see the value in implementing those things for the company culture as a whole. And it's pretty much always been oh my gosh, we should have done this sooner. So I think listening to what some of the things I said earlier, find some of those small pieces that just align really well with what your company purpose is and what your goals are. And just go ahead and start to build upon that, start to roll that snowball down the hill. And I think you'll start to really see people attached to it. And then that adds like motivation to what it is that you're doing. Once you start to do those little things, before you know it, you'll have people that raise their hand and say, oh my gosh, how can I be involved? What can I do? I want to help push this along. Or I have an idea. Can I present it to you? It really does help open the door to some of that conversation. And so that would be, to me, that's, if I give you one takeaway, that would be my one takeaway in terms of piece of advice.
So I think to further ask about that, in your opinion, what is like a regenerative future look like?
Oh man.
Again, maybe a quick summary.
The regenerative future would really look like, I think people focused on doing exactly what they can. Like, I'm never the person that says everyone has to compost. I'll just use that as an example. So everybody knows what composting is. I'm never one to say that everyone should do just that one thing, because I don't think that's how we get to being regenerative. I think we get there through everyone picking those few things that they know they can do well, they know they can do consistently, they know they can implement, and they know they can build upon. And when each of us finds those things for us and we take them and we run with them, well, then we start to create the impact that builds for everyone. So I think that's how I would answer.
And you mentioned before that you did a TEDx talk. What was that like? Was it tough to get on TEDx? I've talked to some other people that said it's very difficult. It's very competitive. Some people took them like years to get on. What was the topic you talked about? Can you tell us about that experience?
Sure. I'd love to. I did my TEDx in April of this year. I was very lucky. There are 2 TEDx events in the US that are called Countdown. And so they're specific climate change related TEDx events. And I guess there just aren't as many people vying to talk about climate change. And so I don't think that I came up against the same kind of competition that a lot of other TEDx events or TED events people come up against. So that process for me was definitely felt a little bit simpler than what I've heard from some others. I have applied to speak at other TEDx conferences, but this was the first one that I was accepted into. The experience overall was amazing. It was pretty interesting. I went into it because for my normal keynote speaking, my normal sessions are usually between 45 to 60 minutes. And so when they present you with the concept, at first I thought I'd be I'd have 18 minutes. But the group that I worked with, they wanted everyone to be at 10 minutes. I was like, "Oh, I can speak for 10 minutes. That's so easy." But it's more challenging than I anticipated, taking my ideas that I had and kind of scrunching them down and then finding just the most impactful pieces of what I had to say and putting it into that 10 minutes. So it was a really fun process. I learned a lot. It was amazing to stand in that red circle and deliver my big idea, which is the impact of one. And yeah, I loved it. It was so great. It was really special.
What impact do you think you had do that TEDx talk? I mean, did anybody comment afterwards saying, "Oh, I saw your TEDx talk. I'd like to work with you," or "did an amazing job," or you kind of impacted them when they heard you speak?
Yes, I immediately that day during intermission, because I was the first speaker that day. So during intermission, someone from the audience came up to me and I have a story that I talk about. I talk about my trash elephant, which is part of my ignition moment. And I talk how everyone has a trash elephant. So it's this whole story, which I won't go into now. It'll take a long time, but it's this whole story that I start my keynote with to really pull people in and get them to start turning and thinking in their own brain. And I had someone stop me in the foyer. He said, "I really want to know the full story of the trash elephant because I think I have a trash elephant." And I was like, "You absolutely have a trash elephant." So I got to stand and have that really fun conversation with him. And then it's now posted it was just last week. Actually, it got posted on YouTube. And I can't get over the comments and the people that have said how they think about impact and they think about sustainability, and it just seems so hard and they don't feel like they can contribute to a solution, that now they've listened and they do understand that they can do one thing and that one thing does matter, because when you do one thing, it ripples out. And so my one thing of standing on that stage and giving that 10-minute talk has now reached, I forget how many, several hundred people. I think I'm getting close to 1,000 people, has now reached that many people. And so if those people listen to it and they do one thing, well, now think of how many more ripples we've created and how many more one things get started. And it just kind of keeps going and keeps going. So yeah, it was really cool. The whole thing was really fun.
That's amazing. Congratulations. So where can people find this TEDx talk, like specifically if they want to go find that video?
Yep, it's on YouTube and it's on the official TEDx Talk YouTube page. And then, but they can also search Courtney Lohmann on YouTube and it pops up. It's right at the top. Yeah.
Okay, I'll make sure that I put the link as well in the show notes of this podcast to make it easier for people to find it. So they don't have to search all over Google or YouTube.
That's awesome. Yes. Thank you.
Now, I want to pivot a little bit because you have a program called Ignite Your Voice, Lead with Purpose. What shift do you hope women will make when they embrace their own power?
Oh, yes. So I have a version of my Impact Rebel keynote that is specific to a female audience. And I think I really start that conversation around how, again, being a Gen Xer and thinking about kind of what we've been taught as we walk into a room is that when we come into work, we're supposed to check everything about us at the door. We have to check our passions. We have to check our feelings. We have to show up in this very constrained atmosphere. And I think in particular for women, that the more authentic we show up, the better leaders we are, the better idea creators we are. We're just more creative and innovative in a space where we have that sense of freedom to just really feel like we can lean into everything about us and not just part of us. And so what I really talk about there is showing up every day exactly as who you are and bringing yourself and your passion fully into your work, and not sitting in the back and waiting for someone to ask your idea, but just to kind of put your hand up and say, "No, I have a solution to this problem. I have this really good idea around how we should handle it." And it really stems a lot from how I handled my own career. I spent many years of my career in that mindset of, I have to be here and this is how things work. And I have to just follow what I'm told and what have you. And then I had this, moment where I went, "No, I'm not going to do that anymore. And I want to be involved in this and I want to bring it into my work. And if it's not going to work here, I'm going to take it and I'm going to go somewhere else." And I was vocal about it. And in a good way, not in a demanding way, but in a good way, and just really leaned more into myself. And it opened so many doors. And so that's really what I talk about in that keynote. Cause I think for women, we identify so much with that. And then knowing that we can start to push those kind of barriers or break that glass ceiling. For some, they feel like it's a glass ceiling, then we do better and we do more. It's really fun.
So how do you measure the success of purpose-driven transformation inside an organization?
It can be measured on a lot of different levels. So it really depends on what the ultimate goal and objective is of your purpose project. So if it's rooted in maybe your employee engagement, then we'd really be looking at numbers around employee intention, retention, or how well you're able to recruit new employees. And then through different maybe like employee surveys and things around what they're working on and how much more engaged they feel or how they relate better with their work, things like that. If it's related to you're changing something with your products or your services, then it could be related in how you're gauging success with consumers or how you're gauging your success with your clients. And it'd be having different kinds of conversations and surveys and feedback from them in order to really kind of measure what your success has been. So it just depends on which direction you go with your programs.
So like you mentioned in kind of like the beginning of our conversation about how like leadership has changed over the last decade, where do you think leadership is going next? Do you have any idea? What do you think is like the next step of business leadership?
I guess I see it as the next step of business leadership should be more, I guess the word I would use is more open. I think if we have business leaders that step into a space, and I'm talking like CEO level, C-suite level kind of leaders, that if they step into a space with their own like confidence and self-assurance, right? And they take that and they give that out to their teams and they say, no, I want to see you step into your confidence and your self-assured decision-making. And I want you to bring those ideas in. And so kind of just having that being that like very open leader that says, no, I'm not going to just tell you and give you every directive. I'm going to be open and empower you to come towards me with whatever those things are, and then have them empower their teams to do the same and et cetera, et cetera. I think to me, that is really where we need to be from a leadership standpoint. I think we'll see really cool, exciting ideas that bubble up and that continue to change how we operate day to day and the products that we interact with and what our future looks like. And I think we'll see more big innovation. Right?
What do you believe are some like most overlooked qualities of a true impact leader?
People who care. I think in whatever like quote unquote care means, I think sometimes people are criticized for being too emotional about something or being too attached to something. But I think that's like, I don't think we should scold people for caring about what it is that they do. And I think that's something really overlooked, that we should really have people embrace what they care about and let them pour into that versus turning that faucet off. So I would say that's one of them. I would say allowing people to be more creative without those four walls boxing them in. I think for the most part, I would say I feel like in my career, for the most part, I've only been allowed to be creative to a certain degree. And I think that's always been a little bit of a hindrance. I don't think we should tell people, we shouldn't start to hear an idea and say, we've tried that and it didn't work. We didn't necessarily try it from the same perspective that person's talking about it from. And so I think, again, when you have people that are more open and allowing people to kind of develop those ideas, that if we don't box that creativity in, we really give that space for what those innovative ideas could look like. It could be the next big solution that we see. So I would probably pick those two things that I think are pretty overlooked at this point.
That's a really good answer. Do you have like any daily practices or mindset shifts you practice on your own to help you stay aligned with your own purpose? Some people, they do meditation every day, or they journal, or like they go to yoga.
I mean, I do exercise every day, but I don't do any of those things specific necessarily to my work. But I would say one of the most important things for me that keeps me calm is just to be active and moving in whatever that looks like. So some days a week for me, that's yoga. For some days a week for me, that's weights. For almost every day of the week, I do a walk with my dog, which is lovely. Right now it's hot here in Charleston, so we start off pretty early in the morning with those. And it's a nice way to start the day and clear my head. I listen to music, I get energized. But I think I've been so rooted in my own purpose now for so long that it's really never that far from me. And even as I've started my own business, and that's challenging to do. You sometimes are going to take on projects that aren't quite 100% exactly what you were hoping it was going to be or what have you, but you also have to pay the bills. And so it's allowing yourself to have some of that flexibility and know that you're still building towards what you want to do and where you're going. And then also reminding yourself what's most important to you and why you started it to begin with. So I think that's what I try to help myself with.
Can you maybe like clearly articulate to the audience, like, what are some of like your offerings to help people become better business leaders?
Oh, perfect. Yeah. So I offer, my keynote is probably one of the best things, especially to come and talk with groups and touch all size groups. That keynote can also be a deep dive or a workshop or kind of a facilitated training, so to speak. So if you have that your organization, you want to start to implement sustainability, and maybe you've designated 5 or 6 people that they need some help on how to structure that, where to begin and how to align, et cetera. I offer workshops that I can come in and spend 2 half days with the team and really help them start to dig through that and get on their way. I work with corporations on a variety of different levels from a consulting and fractional leadership standpoint. So I can come in and be a fractional sustainability leader and act as almost as if I'm your chief sustainability officer, which is a really interesting thing. I really dig into the organization to do that. Or I can come in as a consultant and really help you with very specific projects around sustainability and bring that expertise. I am particularly an expert in strategy and development of a sustainability program for an organization. I'm really good at aligning the company's culture and goals and mission with sustainability and getting them on the right path and helping them develop what their sustainability strategy should be. And I also do corporate trainings, like straight up Sustainability 101. Here's what the terms are. Here's what you need to know. Here's how it pairs well with your organization. So I do those things as well. Those are probably all my different news right now.
What's like the best way for somebody, if they had a question about a conversation today or interested in working with you, what's the best way they can reach out to you?
You can always reach me on my website, which is just courtneylohmann.com. I kept it nice and simple and easy. And LinkedIn. LinkedIn is another great way. I think I post a lot of content there. I try to make sure that I put out some quality content for people. It helps get them going. I'm on it pretty much every day. And so if somebody wants to send me a message there, connect with me there, that's also a great way to go.
So my final question for the podcast is, for somebody listening today wants to be an impact rebel, since we talked about that a lot, what's one step they can take right now for them to get started?
Throw out the rule book. Wherever you're sitting today, throw out what you think is what you're supposed to do and give yourself some time to really think and dream and find what it is that's important to you, find that passion and that purpose, and then work yourself back into, okay, how do I fit that into what it is that I do? So break down the walls, think big, and you'll do it.
Courtney, I really love this conversation. It's really been fantastic. I mean, I personally am really interested in sustainability and helping the environmental, and as well as being beneficial to the community and supporting everybody. I think what you're doing is really amazing, very important. So I want to thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing something that you're really passionate about. I mean, it really comes through in like your voice and the way you talk, that you're very excited about this, and rightfully so, because this is very important. And hopefully that you're shining the light on as many organizations as possible so they can also jump on this train of living in a better world. So I want to thank you so much for coming on this podcast and sharing with our audience all about sustainability and the importance of true leadership. And thank you so much for everything that you do.
Wow. Thank you for having me. This has been so much fun today. I've really enjoyed speaking with you, Daniel. Love your show. So thanks for having me on. I've just really loved it. Thank you.